Protests across the United States and in cities in Canada and around the world are saying enough is enough after the recent death of George Floyd, who, as you know, is the black man killed by police in Minneapolis last month. His is only the most recent incident of that kind, and despite a pandemic, it's prompted hundreds of thousands to take to the streets and call for change. With us now for his perspective, a dual citizen of Canada and the United States. In Ajax, Ontario, journalist Morgan Campbell. And Morgan, it's good of you to join us tonight for obviously an extremely important conversation. I just want to start with a real simple question. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm stressed out naturally. And again, like none of this is abstract to me. Like I've lost friends to police brutality. A teammate of mine from a teammate and a classmate of mine at Northwestern University, like 21 years ago, almost to today, almost to the day, was killed by a police officer in Chicago after a low-speed chase that started when he changed lanes without signaling, right? And this is what starts this cascade of events that ends up in his death. You know, and the city paid 8 figures to settle the civil suit with his family. Same day, that same day, another black motorist, unarmed, LaTonya Haggerty, was killed by police in Chicago. So this is a really close issue to my heart in that sense, and also in the sense that I have family members on the south side of Chicago right now, like dealing with this, wondering like when they'll be able to leave their homes again, between, you know, protests and the potential for riots and the potential for a police crackdown. It's a nerve-wracking time.
Can I just get a little background on you? How did you come to be a dual citizen of Canada and the United States?
Because my parents are American, and my sisters and I were all born here in Canada. We were born in North York, but my parents are American. My parents are from Chicago, as are, you know, many of their parents, and then their parents were from the South. You know, and I'm giving you like a very, very, very condensed version, but that's how it was. And it's funny, my parents came to Canada at a time like very similar to this one. It was in the late 60s. And my grandparents had already come here. My grandfather was a musician. He used to get booked. He's a pianist. He used to get booked in Toronto. So he started coming here and he liked it. He started bringing my grandmother and my youngest uncle. They liked it. So they moved up here in 1966. And then my parents, you know, were still hanging on to the idea that they might one day in their country of birth get treated as equals, right? But the assassination of Martin Luther King pushed them a big step towards leaving the United States. And then when Richard Nixon was elected, like that was the last straw. And you hear about these Americans that say, if so-and-so gets elected, I'm moving to Canada. But that was what my parents did. So when Richard Nixon got elected, they're like, this is the last straw. These white Americans are never going to get it. Let's leave, which is the condensed version of how we wound up here.
Yeah, you've described events that took place in 1968. So I think for a lot of people watching us right now, they will have, obviously, if they're younger, they'll have no firsthand memory of this, which is why I want to bring some images up here and have you speak to them. Because frankly, the last time I think we saw images this dramatic was in 1968 after Dr. King was killed. And I want you, first of all, to look at that. That's Minneapolis. That is how people are observing the death of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis. And I just want to know, as you look at that image, what comes to mind?
I mean, what strikes me is how diverse, in terms of race, gender, age, this crowd is. And also the fact that they are observing mask and, to the extent that they can, social distancing protocols, because the pandemic didn't go away for all of this. And what's surprising but not really surprising is that police brutality and white supremacy did not take a break during the pandemic, right? None of these things slowed down for the pandemic. And so when these guys in Minnesota, they want to come out and protest, but they are also cognizant of the fact that the pandemic can kill you too. And the pandemic can, not just you, but could kill your neighbor, could kill the person standing next to you if you have the disease and don't know it. But to me, it's the solidarity that stands out above everything, and that this particular killing, more so than others, has triggered not just a response, but solidarity, at least on one side of this debate, if that's what you want to call it.
I think you're right about that. And I wonder, why do you think that is?
That's a very good question. I'm I'm not sure, and this is something you're gonna have to ask white people, like, because the thing is, between you and I, you're the only one that knows what white people think and say when black people aren't around. But I don't quite know what it is about this killing that inspired this many more white people to come out in good faith. And I'm sure we'll get to the riots and the protesters and the looters later, because there's a lot of white people among that group of people, and they're not doing any of this in good faith. But this particular killing, and what you've seen that you haven't seen before, is other police, like some rank and file police officers, but police chiefs speaking out in public about how what Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd was wrong. Instead of instinctively, reflexively closing ranks around a police officer that killed an unarmed black person. Like, this is different. We haven't seen much of this before. Like, if other high profile police officers and police officials disagreed with Eric Garner, disagreed with the killing of Eric Garner, disagreed with the killing of Breonna Taylor, or anything like this, we hadn't heard it from them. They kept it private. This is the first time I can think of that so many high profile police officials have been public about disagreeing with the way Derek Chauvin handled this attempted arrest.
Well, it's even more than that. I mean, I've seen pictures of police officers hugging demonstrators. I've seen police officers taking the knee with demonstrators. I have seen a kind of solidarity there that you've not seen in previous demonstrations. And and yes, it is a more multicultural group that is demonstrating, and in particular, it is clearly a group that is not interested in practicing physical distancing in spite of the pandemic. These are all, I think, if not unique, they're highly unusual elements of this coming together. And I am really curious as to why this one has prompted this distinctive a reaction. So I'm going to push you on that more. Give me your best sense about why you think this one.
Like I just told you, I'm not quite sure, because I know for me personally, like at this point, I'm not desensitized to what a lot of us are calling black trauma porn. I just don't consume it. So I have not seen, up until now, I have not seen video of Ahmaud Arbery getting shot for just going out for a run. I have not seen video of George Floyd dying. I've seen the still photos, and the still photos are enough. But maybe uh, especially this incident, this killing, because it was so graphic and so unambiguous, and only the worst bad faith troll could find the counter argument to this. Um, that some people have been spurred and kind of jolted uh, out of their complacency. But again, beyond that, like, I'm really not quite sure what makes this one different in the eyes of police. And again, especially in terms of like these police, like the officer, like the police chief in Flint, Michigan, or in Houston, Texas, who feel really comfortable coming out and expressing solidarity with peaceful protesters. And again, this to me is key, with criticizing, distancing themselves, and calling for punishment for another police officer, because this is something we haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm. Let's bring a second image up. Tony Burke's directing today. Could you please bring up the image of the White House? This was the other night. Now, this is a moment in time at the White House, but it's not the most dramatic moment. As we know, there was a fire set, and then it got very dramatic, and they moved, apparently, President Trump into a bunker where they, excuse me, hide presidents in the event of terrorism. And again, I'm going to ask you, as you look at that image, what strikes you the most?
What strikes me the most, and and I do have to be careful here. Like, I'm here in my capacity, in some ways, in my capacity as a journalist and not as a private citizen. Um, and I don't want anyone to infer my political leanings from what I'm saying. And as a journalist, I'm not supposed to disclose who I'm voting for and all of this. Uh, Having said all that, what stands out to me is just the utter cowardice of the American president.
In
And
what
here,
respect?
in every respect, like, here's a guy um, who who faked having bone spurs to get out of having to go to Vietnam. And now, if you had a righteous moral reason not to go to Vietnam, like we celebrate those people, we celebrate Muhammad Ali, we celebrate all these people that came to Canada, and I have relatives among them too, draft dodgers who said, I'm not fighting this unjust war. But Donald Trump was not dodging Vietnam on the basis of justice or injustice. He was dodging Vietnam on the basis of inconvenience, right? And he didn't want to risk what he had. Now, and he was happy to let other people's sons go over there to Southeast Asia and fight and possibly die in the jungle. Now, so here's a guy.
We should just say, let me just jump in for a second, because in the interest
Yes.
of fairness, we should say, you're not just making a willy-nilly allegation there. Mr. Trump was asked years later, which foot was it that you had the bone spurs in that got you out of Vietnam? And he couldn't remember. So when
This
you
is what
say
I'm saying. No,
yeah,
I'm not making, this is what I'm saying. I'm not making willy-nilly accusations. This is the other thing, is
exactly.
that you don't have to make up accusations about Donald Trump. Like, so much of what he has done is a matter of public record. Like, when you call him racist, it's not just, you're not making it up. It's because he was sued by the Department of Justice for not renting apartments in his buildings to Black and Latino renters. Like, that is an act of racism. So when you call him racist, it's not just an opinion, it's a point of fact. So here's Donald Trump, scared to go to war, fine. But now,
He did
as the
come out though.
president,
His first comments when he was asked about this were, "Well, that's not good." So he didn't
what's not good?
automatically, the death of Mr. Floyd. He didn't automatically walk in lockstep, with the police as he might have in the past.
Here's the thing, Stephen. I mean, you might want to be fair to the president, but like, we are long past the point of taking what he says at face value, and this is a big part of what's wrong with the news industry. If I don't know, I can say if I ran a publication, but I'm never going to run a publication. No one's ever going to promote me to that level, or I would get fired, because I would never take what the president says at face value. Like Daniel Dale, formerly of the Toronto Star, now of CNN, keeps a running log of all the lies Donald Trump has told from before he was president. And so now, when a defenseless Black person gets killed by a cop, hands cuffed behind him, his airway cut off, and he essentially suffocates, Donald Trump says, that's not good. I'm supposed to believe those 3 words from Donald Trump? This is the same person, same president now, who is considering invoking the Insurrection Act against protesters, right? And this was a law created to suppress potential slave rebellions, right? In the wake of the Haitian Revolution, which spooked slave owners all across the United States. Now, and so now you expect me to believe that he really thinks his killing is not good just because he uttered the 3 words, that's not good? Listen, I'm long past the point of taking Donald Trump at face value. And this is why I say him cowering in this bunker, right? Again, afraid to go fight in Vietnam, that's fine. I know, like, my Uncle Ken fought in Vietnam. And this is my point. Like, my Uncle Ken has likely killed people on behalf of the United States, on behalf of a country that still, he comes home and treats him like a half citizen. Cool. So Donald Trump is scared to go fight when he has to go fight. But now that he's the president and can hide behind police, hide behind local police, state police, National Guard, the military, now wants to act like a tough guy, except when the fight comes to his front door, he runs and hides in the basement. And deploys local cops to fire tear gas and brutalize and assault and push around peaceful protesters yesterday so they can clear a path for him to go have a photo opportunity in front of a church holding a Bible. And so these are all acts of cowardice. So when I see that picture, I just think of cowardice. And it's beautiful that Donald Trump said the words, that's not good. Again, I don't trust anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. This is not a knee-jerk accusation. It's based on years and years and years and years of Donald Trump's public record as someone who does not tell the truth.
No, I understand. Okay, let's put up one more picture here. And this is New York City. And this is, my goodness, this is in the midst of a global pandemic, and look at the people packing into the streets. What's your take on that picture?
That tells you how, and again, assuming all these people are protesters in there for the right reasons, it tells you the depth of the nerve that this particular killing has struck. The people in New York have been inside for weeks and weeks and weeks. And a lot of people want to stay inside because they know this virus is out there. But people are comfortable assuming the risk of coming in contact with the virus in order to make their voices heard, to denounce racialized, racist police brutality. And so that is very stirring. And again, it's the opposite of what Donald Trump is doing. Like, that's courage as opposed to cowardice.
This is an awkward question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Morgan, there are, I'm sure, white people watching and listening to this right now who want to be simpatico with the Black communities of this country and the Black community in the United States. They want to be allies in this historic moment, but they don't know what to say, and they are afraid to say things because, of course, this is not their story, and they don't want to say or do the wrong thing. Could you give them some advice at this moment?
Uh, Advice to white people. One, you hit on it when you say it's not white people's story, and so they're afraid to say things. So don't say anything. Sometimes you gotta listen, right? And like, again, I'm a journalist and I'm transitioning to to capital W writer, but at the same time, one of the things you learn if you want to be a good journalist is that your output is only as good as your input, and so you can be a really good writer, but you have to research. You know what you're doing when you're researching? You're not talking, you're reading, you're taking in. You have to be a really good interviewer, and you also have to listen during interviews. And if you can't do that, if I'm talking over the person that's giving me the answer, well, then I'm never going to learn. So that's a big part of it. And then, like, more generally, here's the thing. Because and I'm reluctant, like, I don't necessarily like being put on the spot like this as the Black person who's going to tell white people how to solve racism, because that is on white people to do. Like, this is more like when I worked in an office and I would tell the bosses when some racist stuff would come up and I'd have to go put out these fires and I'd say, hey, look, this is unpaid labor I'm doing. First of all, I'm taking time out of my work to come put out this fire, and the white people are all working. They're pushing their careers ahead. I'm over here putting this fire out. And I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not getting bonus. I'm not getting overtime. And I'm far from the only Black person in a corporate setting who's had to do stuff like that. Now, you remember the photo of the guy punching out Richard Spencer, the neo-Nazi?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so the guy runs up on, there's a white guy, runs up on white supremacist Richard Spencer and punches him right in the face. And the pearl clutching starts. Oh, why would you do that? We need peaceful protest. It's not right to punch people. So in a general sense, like, certain people, like, that might be the only language they understand. But to me, the bigger point is, now, whether or not I agree with punching Richard Spencer and people like him, right, with punching out known white supremacists, I do have to applaud and support and show solidarity with that person's motive. Because here is a white man who was willing, able, eager to make white enemies in order to denounce white supremacy, to make white enemies in the service of fighting racism. So now, you ask me what white people should do. Like, you decide whether or not you're willing to lose white friends over racism. Because if you're not, you're part of the problem, you're not part of the solution. Like, the white friends I have, they are white friend losing white friends. Like, these are the people I have time for. But if you are a white person asking how to end racism, but your mom, your uncle, your brother, your best friend from high school says racist stuff and you don't say anything to them about it, then you're just letting it fester. So, and I have no illusions about, like, white people who aren't up to speed on racial issues, like taking my advice. But you asked for it, and there it is.
I did ask for it, and I'm glad you gave it. I do want to, I want to spend a moment here. We're down to our last few minutes, and I want to spend a moment talking about, all of the reportage I saw initially said 98% of the demonstrators are here with a pure heart, who are trying to show their solidarity with their Black friends and neighbors. And and then 2% of the devil's brigade came in and exploited the chaos in order to destroy property and so on and so forth. And of course, that has now begat a potential order from the president to, bring in the military and settle it that way. And I wonder how distressed you are about the notion that what was coming together as a truly bonding community experience may somehow yet again be derailed by this very tiny percentage of mischief makers who, you know, may ruin the whole damn thing.
Yeah, I'm very distressed, especially in the sense that, um, again, like, so this is when I talk about good faith and bad faith protesters, and so many people, especially white people, showing up at protests knowing, and now, and this is what we've learned in the last few weeks, like there are different flavors of rioter, right? There are the people that are legitimately angry about this and need to vent, and I'm not going to tell them they can't do that. Um, if you are legitimately angry about this, and then there are the people that want to loot, and then there are the people that just want to make real trouble. And the problem is that, like a lot of these, and what we're learning too is a lot of these people are white. When you look at the footage of the protests, you see a lot of white people in there. You listen to the police from Minneapolis saying 80% of the people we round up are from out of state, and a lot of these folks are white. And worst case scenario, they're like white supremacists looking for a fight, knowing that the backlash is going to come down on communities of color. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, they're just white people who think they can go out and loot. Hey, there's some looting going on. Let's go get some stuff. But again, and they might not have in mind specifically that what they do will trigger a crackdown against Black people, a crackdown against Latinos. But they're sort of aware. They're like our friend Amy Cooper from Canadian Amy Cooper from Central Park. They know that that's who the police are going to focus on with disproportionate force. So it's a big problem because when Donald Trump says I should bring in the army to quell these protesters, especially in a country that's segregated, you don't have to guess about where to send the army if you want to crack down on alleged protesters, right? And if you want to broaden that mission from protesters to just keeping people safe, right? Air quotes. It's not difficult to tell which neighborhoods to send the army to because the country is segregated. You know who lives in what neighborhood. So I'm very distressed over that because I know, and we all know, just like Canadian born and raised Amy Cooper knew, that when the law enforcement crackdown comes, it is disproportionate and brutal against Black people, Black individuals, and Black communities in ways that it isn't against like these school shooters and Dylan Roof, who are able to kill multiple people, arrested, armed, yet safe, and come into custody alive.
Morgan, I don't want to end this in a Pollyanna kind of way, but I think it would be wrong as well if I didn't ask you this question, so I'm going to. Is there anything that's transpired in the last 5 days that has made you the slightest bit hopeful about where this story may ultimately go?
Again, it's been heartening to see the solidarity, and it's been heartening to see, again, other high-profile police officials finally recognize that you cannot excuse every single police officer that kills an unarmed civilian, and especially an unarmed Black civilian. Like, this was right there in front of you, and like there aren't as many people trying to find ways to blame George Floyd's death on George Floyd as there normally are. But like in the long run, am I optimistic? No. You know why? Because Donald Trump's the president, and Donald Trump is not going to say or do anything to unite the country. And so like it's time to stop expecting him to do that. And also, Donald Trump is toying, and again, he's using this as sort of a test run, right, to figure out how much he can get away with in terms of using the military to ride herd on civilians. So we don't know what's going to happen on election day right? Which neighborhoods are going to, which residents of which neighborhoods are even going to be allowed to vote? We don't know. And then say Donald Trump loses the election, do you think he's leaving the office on January 20th, 2021? There is almost no way that he leaves peacefully. Like, this is, people have to realize that uh, the United States has become one of the countries that Americans watch on television and say, geez, I couldn't imagine living there. Right? It's become one of these countries that people come leave to go to the United States to escape these exact circumstances, right? Ethnic minorities, religious minorities under autocratic military rule, brutalized by police and by authorities. These are the conditions that create people that come to Canada, come to the United States as immigrants and as refugees. And as Canada in the United States, we say, welcome, you can have more freedom here than you had where you came from. But the United States is one of those countries now. And this is what I cannot stress enough. And again, is people, like, we seem to want to give the country and white Americans and Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt. I'm not ready to do that anymore. So even though I'm encouraged by the solidarity, I'm still highly, highly, highly concerned with what's going to happen in November and January.
I hear you. Morgan, it's awfully good of you to come on to TVO tonight and share your very heartfelt views with us. Good luck going forward, and thanks so much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.